Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Your hosts, Joseph and Michelle Whalen, a husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics, are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom.
Welcome to Insights into Entertainment. This is episode 132, The Year in Review. I'm your host, Joseph Whalen, and my caring and generous co-host, Michelle Whalen.
Hi, everyone.
How you doing today, dear?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing all right. So we are totally off our normal schedule here.
We are like so out of left field. It's just not even funny.
So the original plan was basically to just take this week off. We weren't doing any broadcasts. We weren't doing any recordings. But we weren't able to get this podcast in last week before we basically shut the studio down.
Right. Actually, it was 2 weeks ago.
Yes, it was 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Because
we knew we were going to be off the week of Christmas, but the week beforehand, you weren't feeling well, and I was kind of tired, and we just kind of...
And we'll talk about why I wasn't feeling well, because it actually ties into one of the segments today.
Right.
But I wanted to get this in by the end of the year. In fact, the podcast we were going to do was going to be a regular, entertainment news podcast. And we waited so long that news was no longer relevant.
Right.
So we decided we're going to do a year in review. So this week, we're going to mix things up a bit. Instead of doing our regular news articles of the week, we're going to go back and take a look and reflect on some of the big articles, the news articles of the year in each of our respective categories. And then we'll finish up with a recap of our trip to Maryland for Ocean City Comic-Con, along with some footage of the show, before we end with our afterthoughts, which kind of, in hindsight, set the scenes for next year. But before we do that, I would invite folks to subscribe to the podcast. You can find audio versions of this podcast listed as Insights into Things. Audio versions would be listed as Insights into Entertainment. Video versions of this podcast can be found listed as Insights into Things. And we're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, pretty much any place you can get a podcast these days. I'd also invite our audience to write in, give us your feedback, give us your shows that you want us to plug, your conventions that you want us to plug. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings.com. You can hit us on Twitter at insights_things, on Facebook at facebook.com/insightsintothingspodcast. On Instagram at instagram.com/insightsintothings, or check us out on our official website at insightsintothings.com. Shall we get into it?
Sure, let's do this.
All righty. Let me make sure I push all the right buttons here. So what happened in Disney Detective?
So... one of the stories was that Scarlett Johansson had sued Disney over Black Widow, in what might have been an even bigger story than the release of the movie Black Widow, the first MCU film since before the pandemic. Star Scarlett Johansson filed a lawsuit against Disney seeking money she believed she was owed on the film after it was released on Disney Plus Premier Access in addition to the theaters. Now, at the time, it was reported that Johansson had possibly lost out on as much as $50 million due to the move, and then 2 months later, the lawsuit between the two was settled for a reported $40 million.
Yeah, and while the lawsuit itself, considering how much money she's made from Disney,
right,
both on the film and on previous films, that lawsuit was significant, but I think the implications that it had for the industry itself was much further reaching than the actual lawsuit itself.
Mm-hmm.
It really forced the movie industry to reevaluate its release plans, its compensation packages,
Mm-hmm.
how it's treating its talent now, how it's
Right.
treating its
Right.
directors and actors.
Mm-hmm.
And I think all of that was a direct result of how we functioned during the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
that initial phase of the pandemic.
Right, and you figure now we're in another phase of it, unfortunately, and now you're starting to see things go back into some sort of a lockdown situation slowly because of the different variants and how much faster it seems to be spreading.
Yeah.
And people, even people that are fully vaccinated who are getting it, fortunately very low percentage are hospitalized with it, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
But you're starting to see changes, and what's nice is that there are still movie companies that, even though they are releasing movies in the theater, they are still releasing them as a streaming accessible movie.
Sure.
But yet there are some companies that haven't decided to go back to that, and that's kind of unfortunate because not everybody feels comfortable enough going back into a theater. So now, where you could be making some more money doing, a $30 premiere access for a movie, you're losing out on that. And obviously we don't really know the implications yet because they haven't really talked about how much the movie
Right, you
companies
haven't seen
aren't.
the box office numbers,
Right.
the turnout numbers or anything like that. You haven't seen those published, really.
Right. The only thing you've seen, obviously, one of the biggest movies that, just recently came out is Spider-Man.
Right.
And that they had already broken records with the pre-sale tickets for it. They sold more tickets than Avengers Endgame had sold. So that one has definitely been a huge box office success in this time. And as of right now, there's no plan for it to come out on Disney Plus because of Sony. No plan for it to come on, HBO Max. So really, unless you want to see this, you have to go to the theater.
Right.
And I guess enough people feel comfortable or maybe live in an environment where not to, because I've talked to a couple of people who have gone and have seen it, and fortunately they live in a small area where, maybe there were 10 people in the theater.
Yeah.
But I know if we went to go see it, the theater would be completely full.
Yeah.
Unless we wait like another month and a half, then maybe we could luck out and have a half-empty theater. So.
Well, and I think the other thing that this kind of alludes to is the compensation package. For the longest time, you had your talent was compensated flat out. You'd get a certain amount for the movie.
Right.
And based on what your previous movie, totals were, you could negotiate better numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And then we saw this idea of bonus numbers being packed in, and Robert Downey Jr. is a great example of that. Was as Avengers Endgame continued to rake it in to record numbers, he would continue to hit these goals and get bonus packages.
Right.
So the bulk of his compensation didn't come from direct compensation from a salary. It came from all these
bonuses. Right.
And over the course of 10 years, the actors could see that trend occurring and would opt for that. So they'd take a much smaller amount for direct compensation going into the movie and then just collect on these residuals as they hit these bonus marks.
Right.
And I think, if anything, this might fly in the face of that philosophy at this point, where if the theaters are not going to be your primary form because they're no longer going to be a reliable form of income,
right,
then you're going to start seeing your actors and your directors and everyone
more up front.
They're going to want more up front. You're going to see that balance now shift again, and this may be a significant change for the industry itself. those are all the reasons why we picked this one as one of our top stories.
Yeah.
And our last two actually involve the parks. Tell us about our next one.
Right. So the first one, it had been announced towards the beginning of the year that one of the first bombs that dropped based off of the park was that Walt Disney World transportation service to and from Orlando Airport, known as Magical Express, would be discontinued at the end of this year. So now guests as of January 1st will have to work out how they'll be getting to and from the Orlando International Airport to the Disney resorts. As of right now, Mears basically seems to be one of the major companies out there who have now offered their service since the news story broke. And Mears actually was already running the service. They were contracted through Disney, so they were already Mears buses and Mears drivers that were doing this. Now, for those that are old enough to remember or have gone to Disney back in the day, that was actually how one of the options to get to Disney. Or, back in the day, Disney didn't offer that as part of the package. Disney only started doing the busing when the cruise line actually started, because it was part of your cruise experience. So you got to the airport and they picked up your luggage and then they brought you to the resort or to the port, depending on if you were doing land or sea first, and then they took you back to the airport. And that's when Disney realized, hey, we can kind of continue this, and that's when they kind of expanded it. Now, also at that time when Mears started doing it for the cruise line, when you booked a Disney package through Disney, they would suggest, hey, if you want for $17 or whatever it was round trip, we'll have Mears come and get you. Now, you still had to get your own luggage. They weren't getting it for you, but you didn't have to worry about making arrangements to get a car, if you didn't want to rent a car or have a taxi or something. There was that option, and then again, it kind of morphed into it. So we really don't know what the whole reasoning behind it was. Obviously, hey, money, I'm sure, because that's what it always comes down to. So now they're kind of backtracking and going away from giving it to you for free, and now Mears is offering the service. There's another company that just came out a couple weeks ago. I can't remember what the name of it was off the top of its head, but their motor coaches were going to have like a train theme to them, and they were showing that the drivers were kind of going to be dressed like conductors.
Well, that's because they're putting in a new light rail line.
Right. Well, that's the train that they're still...
And that's years away.
Right. And the idea with the train is that the train would more than likely go to...
downtown Disney.
To downtown Disney Springs area. So that's where the train, but again, that's still kind of far out. But there's this second company that has now emerged with motor coaches. Same type of thing, Mears is doing. You basically buy either a one-way or a round-trip ticket, and, you get your own luggage when you get to the airport, but the bus will now take you, so now you have more than just Mears doing it. If you're looking for,
you always did though. You always had different options.
There were always
to use.
Right. You could, and especially now with Uber and Lyft, you can even.
We used to rent a car. You could get a taxi. You could get shuttle services that ran back and forth.
It's not like you get to the airport and, oh my God, what am I doing?
The problem with this is not that you didn't have options to get from the airport to Disney. It's that Disney provided this to you free of charge. And it wasn't free of charge.
No,
the problem that you run into is that all these things that Disney provided that were, quote, free, were all worked into the price of the resort, the price of your ticket, the price of everything that you purchased.
Right.
So Disney ramps up all these prices. They raise their prices every year to compensate themselves for the service. So whether or not you use that service or not.
You were paying
for it.
So,
for instance, the last few trips down, we drove, okay? So we didn't use any of their services for transportation to get to and from the property.
Right.
We were still paying the full price for the resort, though.
Right.
So they weren't losing money on this
Right.
anywhere along the lines.
Yeah.
And the biggest reason I put this in here as one of the stories to review is it's one more of the things that Disney is doing wrong now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this started a few years back
Right.
when they started to nickel and dime you with refills on soda. Okay, so it cost more for the cup than it did to fill that cup with soda.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very well known fact in the beverage industry.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what did Disney do? So Disney didn't want people going back and refilling their cups at their economy resorts, right? So they decided to invest in this new technology where they put a chip in all these cups, which took that really expensive cup and made it even more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
So now you take that really expensive cup, you take it to a more expensive dispenser, and they can tell how many times you've refilled that.
Mm-hmm.
In an effort to what? Save money? To stop people from getting refills? Again, that was one of probably the first things I think that sticks out to me.
Mm-hmm.
Followed by paying for parking.
Right.
For years, you could park on Disney property free of charge. They didn't have the best parking lots because everything was spread out from the resort. So if you
Right.
didn't get there early, you were walking. They didn't offer shuttle services. Then all of a sudden...
Now, this is just for the resort. They always charge
Correct.
parking for the parks.
Correct. Just the resort. Because they charge enough money at the resort.
Right.
You know,
Right.
you're paying a 30 to 40% premium to stay on property at
Right.
Disney than you
Right.
would at an off-property
Right.
resort.
I just wanted to clarify
Right.
that
No, I
if
got
you,
you.
if
I
you
got you.
were if you were just going to the Magic Kingdom for a day and you
Yes,
weren't a
you still
resort
had
guest,
to had to pay
paid
for parking.
But now,
So at the
right.
resort now that for, 15 years we've been going, we didn't have to pay for parking. All of a sudden you do.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't offer any new services. You weren't getting security. You weren't getting shuttles. You weren't getting newer parking. You weren't getting anything for it.
Right.
They just decided, well, we can charge you for it, so we're going to.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one more thing that they needled you with.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And now they're taking away a free service that they gave you that you're already paying for because you're paying the premiums.
Right.
So it's a spiraling thing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no justification for it. They've provided no justification.
Mm-hmm.
And they make it very clear that they're not going to answer questions about it.
Mm-hmm.
This is just the way it's going to be
Right.
since the new CEO came in.
Right.
So then that leads us to our third story, which kind of compounds this, in which Disney really took advantage of the COVID scenario
Mm-hmm.
to kind of really lock things down and really nickel
Right.
and dime. Let's talk about
Right.
that
So
one.
this was that talking about how fast passes are gone and Disney Genie Plus is coming. So since the parks reopened, Fast Pass Plus had been suspended, meaning that all guests needed to wait in a standby line for the attractions. And then Disney recently had announced that Fast Pass Plus would not be coming back and that would be replaced by 2 new paid options being able to skip the lines, and that's Genie Plus. Now, obviously, as everybody knows, we have not been down there since everything, so we really can't speak to what Disney, what Genie and Genie Plus is like. We
Only
haven't,
from accounts, first-hand accounts.
right. So it's just from people that we've talked to or seen or read and things like that, and it still has a lot of bugs. It is definitely not worked out yet, I think, in my opinion, from what I've seen. Again, here's another nickel and diming thing where now, to give Disney some credit on this, they were really one of the last amusement park companies, theme park companies, to start paying for this.
I cannot give Disney credit for being the last person to rob me. I'm sorry.
I'm just saying it was very small. Very, 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 very small.
Thank you, Disney, for being the last person in Florida to pick my pocket. I appreciate it.
Right. So, unfortunately, people have been seeing this in other theme parks for years. Disney was one that they were kind of the first ones, as far as I know, to even start any sort of fast pass idea. Now, for those, again, that are old enough to remember when fast passes started, you could only get them once you physically got to the park. And the idea behind the Fast Pass wasn't necessarily to cut the line, but it was almost like a placeholder for you.
Right, it was like a reservation.
So the idea behind it was that when you went and got a Fast Pass, technically the Fast Pass time was the same, should have been the same amount of time for if you had waited online.
Right.
So if you got the
go
Fast
do
Pass,
something else
right,
and come back and
so
not have to wait.
So if the wait was 45 minutes, roughly when you would go and get your Fast Pass, it would be for a 45, a time spot within 45 minutes, and then you could go again, do something else, and then go. And then once that Fast Pass time hit, then you could go and get another one.
Right.
Then they kind of morphed it, because the other thing too was that you would go and get a Fast Pass first thing in the morning, and the Fast Pass time would be for like 4 hours later. So then it became, you got your Fast Pass, well now you couldn't get another Fast Pass, but you had 4 hours to go do something else. You do something else, so maybe you ended up with 3 Fast Passes by the end of the day. Well, then they morphed it to a different, as technology advanced. Then if you were a resort guest, you could actually pre-book your Fast Pass, and you could pre-book 3 at a time. And then as soon as your third one expired on that day, you could make another reservation either on your phone, on the app, or at a kiosk. So they kind of, morphed it again. And again, all these other parks, and they weren't even offering really the same type of thing. In a lot of cases, it was, for like $30, you got to skip the lines on like 6 rides or something. So they all had their different version of it. And for however long, it seemed to work. There really wasn't, every now and then you'd get something where, the system would go down or something. But all in all, seemed to work. There were certain rides that had, longer waits, and if somebody didn't make their Fast Pass reservation, then, you waited online, or you went back later on in the day when maybe the line would be shorter.
Yeah.
The one thing that did kind of stink was that, for certain rides, first thing in the morning, all the Fast Passes would be gone. You wouldn't even be able to
like
get a
Pinocchio. Which you couldn't even get a Fast Pass on.
Pinocchio.
Not Pinocchio.
Not Pinocchio.
Peter Pan.
Peter Pan.
Peter Pan.
Well, Peter Pan was always one we would always try and get, and usually we did. But if you went to the park that day, you probably couldn't get one. So again, system seemed to work. Didn't really see a need to not have it work. And then the other thing too is that when the park opened while COVID was still going on, it was shocking that they didn't have it in place right away, because why would you
that would be the best time to have it in place, so you don't have people standing shoulder to shoulder in line.
You give people, 5 passes. You up it. You do something more. So people were wondering what the heck's going on. There was all these rumors, and obviously now this is what we have. So now we have the Genie Plus system, so you can have the free version that basically gives you suggestions on...
It basically... The Genie Plus gives you suggested times when you should go get in line, because it does a statistical analysis on when those rides are least booked.
Right. So,
it doesn't get you on a Fast Pass line.
Right, exactly. It basically, so instead of waiting 45 minutes, you'll wait 30 minutes or whatever it is. So then they created the Plus version of it. So for $15 per day per person, it gives you, I don't even know, up to 3 or something lightning lane things.
Except for certain rides.
Right, exactly. Not every ride is under it. And basically what happens, and as far as I know, I don't think you, and again, I'm not an expert, so I could be saying all this wrong stuff, so please don't take this as gospel. This is just from, so you kind of put it in and it says, hey, go to this line or whatever, and you might have a 5-minute wait or something, and you get on that. Well, then there's the extra version of this, which is, I think that's what the Lightning Lane is, where the Genie Plus is the other lane. And this is where now you can pay a premium, an extra fee, to basically cut the line, to get on right away. And it's not the same, not every ride is the same price. Some are $12, some are $15, and I think some are even $20. So along with your $15 that you paid to have the app, then there's the extra $20 so that you don't have to wait on any line, and for that you can only do one per day. That's definitely a one and done.
Now, until Disney realizes how much money they can make off of it.
And again, not every ride is under that, and it's, Rise of the Resistance and the Ratatouille ride, and so
all the
it's
premium rides.
Your premium rides. So, and then they got rid of Rise of the Resistance, virtual queue, which.
So let me rewind a second here.
Okay,
so
sure.
The whole reason you needed Fast Pass was because Disney wanted to cram as many people into the park as physically allowed by law.
Right.
So they wanted to get as many people paying at the gate in the park as possible. And as a result, you wound up having lines that were just egregiously over too long to sit in. Mm-hmm. So Disney started to come up with a whole bunch of different ideas on how to ease the pain of that. So you first got Fast Pass, so you could get through the line faster. Then you got what they did with Dumbo, where they put a second Dumbo ride, which Dumbo always blew me away. That you would wait 45 minutes for like a 45-second ride. It was insane. So they put a second one in, and they gave you a queue, like at a restaurant. You could get a little timer. You waited in queue. You go into the air-conditioned area. You play with the kids in the play area. And when your timer went off, you got in line, and it was fast to get in. That worked out really well.
Yeah.
Then they came out with the virtual queues. And the virtual queues worked great. You had to be in the park to get them,
right,
which was kind of annoying. But once you get in the park, you get into your virtual queue, and then you get called at some point in time during the day with an estimated time. So Disney generated this problem. It wasn't the people that generated it. It wasn't the customers that generated it. It was Disney. So this was Disney's problem, and Disney came up with some creative ways to do it without it being too painful to the customers. And they evolved it over time to make it better. And they had finally when they got that virtual queue, I think that was probably the closest thing to perfection that they had. And if they had stuck with that idea and given you the ability to do 2 or 3 virtual queues a day and left the original Fast Pass in place, you would have been fine.
Right.
Instead, they throw the whole thing out. They throw the baby out with the bathwater. And now they realize, well, hell, people don't like to stand in line. After 50 years of the park being open, they realize that they don't like to stand in line, and they'll pay to not stand in line. So now, let's just charge them for it. And they come out with this completely new system where it's progressive levels of pickpocketing. Oh, you don't want to stand in line? Well, here's this free service that tells you when to get in line. Oh, you really don't want to wait there? Here's another service that you can pay for now that you can get through line. Oh, you really don't want to wait? Oh, here's more money that you can pay per ride. And it's ridiculous what they're doing at this point in time. And as a result, we haven't been down. We haven't been down in 2 years now. Partly because of COVID, I'll give you that. But I don't have no intention of going down. And we're so, at least I am, so turned off by this entire money grab from Disney. And this is why we put 2 articles in the recap here. We're in the process of selling our DVC membership because Disney just isn't worth it anymore. Between this, I would have put the Star Cruiser in, but the Star Cruiser, the issues with the Star Cruiser and the cost with that were just so egregious that I didn't want to revisit it again.
You didn't want to give yourself a heart attack.
Exactly. Like, Disney has gotten to the point where they're not nowhere near as good as they think they are, because you still have all these services that they've pulled out of service since COVID that they're not putting in place. They're not reducing their ticket prices. They're not reducing their resort prices.
If anything, I think there's a price increase that's supposed to be happening.
They're about to kick in a new price increase. And they're putting all these new nickel and diming things in. So it's like, you know what? Disney doesn't want customers like me. We go down sometimes 2 and 3 times a year. And on average, we'll spend 5, maybe 7 grand. At least I will on a lot of merchandise down there. So,
especially with Galaxy's Edge.
so we're probably good for 10 grand a year to Disney. And that's not enough for Disney. So they're not interested in getting people like me. They're interested in getting people that can go down there that have a couple extra zeros in their income bracket than I do. And that's fine because Disney can have those people. Disney can take their money. The problem that you have is because even though they're higher margin customers where you're going to get more money out of them, they're significantly lower volume. Like, does Disney ever hear the term 1%ers? So they're catering to the 1%ers. Well, the 1%ers, the money that you get from the 1%ers is significantly less than the 99%ers that you can be getting money from regularly on a recurring basis.
Yeah.
The 1%ers aren't going to be going down there with the same level of recurrence that your middle income people are. So Disney made this mistake in the 80s. They corrected it in the 90s and 2000s, and they're making the mistake again. To the point that the new CEO, Bob Chapek, there's a petition from Disney customers, over 80,000 signatures to get him removed. Because even though all of this didn't happen under him, the most egregious portion of this has happened under him. And he's done nothing to correct it.
Right.
I'm not a Bob Iger fan, but Bob Iger is many levels below how bad Bob Chapek is at this point in time. So that was our recap of Disney bashing for the year. We're going to take...
I think that's what we need to call the segment going for. Disney bashing by Joe and Michelle.
We're going to take a quick break, and we'll come back with a recap, a less bashing recap of our Star Wars for the year. For over 7 years, the Second Sith Empire has been the premier community guild in the online game Star Wars: The Old Republic. With hundreds of friendly and helpful active members, a weekly schedule of nightly events, annual guild meet and greets, and an active community both on the web and on Discord. The Second Sith Empire is more than your typical gaming group. We're family. Join us on the Starforge server for nightly events such as operations, flashpoints, world boss hunts, Star Wars trivia, guild lottery, and much more. Visit us on the web today at www.thesecondsithempire.com. So with only a little bit of Star Wars negativity here,
just a little,
we'll talk about our Tales from the Edge of the Galaxy recap. So the first story that we have in here is Gina Carano being removed from The Mandalorian. When Season 2 of The Mandalorian came to an end, it certainly looked as though Gina Carano's character, Cara Dune, was preparing for her own spin-off show, Rangers of the New Republic. Then in February, Lucasfilm announced that the former UFC fighter was no longer employed by the company and wouldn't be returning to the role, which was surprisingly vague for the termination of a fairly known star in a new successful series. This all came on the heels of Carano comparing, quote, hating someone for their political views to the persecution of Jewish people by the Nazi Party, of which she really had no basis on which to make that statement. Previously, she had been accused of being transphobic and made remarks about alleged and repeatedly proven to be false voter fraud in the presidential election. Not surprisingly, it was later revealed that Rangers of the New Republic was no longer in development. Go figure. I wonder why.
Hmm.
So this was, I don't know, I think it kind of kicked off a whole atmosphere of accountability, I want to call it.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
where people want to use their celebrity to promote their own priorities without understanding that when you do that, you're representing the company that you're working for.
Right.
Now, if I went out, not being a celebrity, at least I don't think I am at this point, and I used the platform of my employer to make statements that were contrary to my employer's wishes or beliefs or stances, I would totally expect my employer to fire me.
Mm-hmm.
Because I, at that point in time, I'm exploiting my employer for the attention. And this is exactly what happened with Gina Carano and several other people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, several other celebrities throughout the year. And this one really kind of kicked that off.
Mm-hmm.
And just the shock on these individuals' minds that somebody would actually hold me accountable for something I said or done.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm a celebrity and I'm supposed to be above the law. No one's supposed to hold me accountable.
I'm not their puppet.
Right.
You know.
Right. And it's like Disney has a very proven history of having clauses in their employee contracts,
Mm-hmm.
morality clauses and non-disparagement clauses and stuff like that, that you're well, as a celebrity, as a member of their staff, you're well aware of these clauses.
Right.
When you sign that contract. And you pledge to abide by the terms of that contract.
Mm-hmm.
And if you violate that contract, if you go out and you say something negative and you have a non-disparagement clause, that's the same as not showing up for the work.
Right.
And they're well within their rights to get rid of you.
Right. You know, look at what happened with Johnny Depp.
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
on many fronts, not just with Disney, but even with Warner Brothers.
Yep.
With stuff that had happened, you know, in his personal life, unfortunately, that came to light.
Because it reflects poorly on your employer. No,
Right.
Disney is not saying you have to go out there and tote the party line and
Right.
and do messaging for their political beliefs or anything like that. You just need to shut up.
Right.
That was it. And it wasn't like she hadn't been warned. There were 3 incidents before this.
Right. Right.
All you have to, if you want to be that political and you want to be that vocal, you're more than welcome to terminate your contract, go off and be independent, or find an employer that will allow you to do that.
Right. And supposedly there were other things that she had going on in the works. We haven't really heard.
Which we haven't seen yet. Yeah.
You know, anything yet. So, you know, and then there were rumors that she was coming back to Disney, that they had worked out something, but again, nothing
she
came
had
back.
a massive image problem at that point in time, and she had done a series of Running Wild, a show with Running Wild with Bear Grylls for National Geographic, which again is another Disney property, and that came out a couple of months after this controversy did.
Yeah, because they didn't even want to air it.
They
for
did
a
not.
while.
They weren't going to air it, right? And they finally decided to air it, and I have to say, it did wonders to humanize her, at least in my mind, because of the vulnerability that and you could almost excuse some of the stuff that she said and done just as naivety and inexperience and seeing the world through rose-colored glasses and not realizing that there's a expectation. And that's kind of how she came across in the show. And I almost thought that after that, now that you're getting some good press and people are seeing that you really are a somewhat decent human being, Disney might change course. And they haven't.
Right.
So I don't know if it was worse than what was made out in the press or what. But I don't think she's a horrible person. I think she's made bad decisions. And sometimes those bad decisions we have to be held accountable for. You know, she had a great thing going, and she's got to find something else now. But that kicked off the Johnny Depps and the, what was it? I don't know, who was the comedian that just had it? There was another comedian that just came out with an HBO special where he wound up taking heat for it. Too.
Shoot.
Chris Hart, was it?
No. Oh, why can't I think of his name?
Yeah, I can't remember his name either.
Yeah.
But anyway, there was a series of these,
Right.
and you know, you hear this term, oh, it's the woke society. No,
Right.
it's not. It's accountability.
Right.
It's when you do something that's inappropriate that society, now granted, society standards change over time and they evolve. If you fail to evolve with them, then you get left behind.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are people out there that have changed society.
Mm-hmm.
Richard Pryor is a great example of that. Richard Pryor was a type of person who, when he first emerged, was considered offensive. Eddie Murphy, same thing, offensive. People didn't like it, didn't want to hear it, and eventually he changed society to be more acceptable to his type of humor.
Mm-hmm.
Both of those,
Right.
and they're great comedians.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, you know, they recognize what the fallacy was, and they learn how to make it work.
George Carlin too.
George Carlin is another great one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, these are the people that made careers out of being offensive comedians, but they made it funny.
But doing it in a way that wasn't hurtful.
Right. Like George Carlin was brilliant in throwing it back in our faces.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was the type of person that would look at how ludicrous society was and then make us laugh at ourselves for that ludicrousness.
Right.
So, unfortunately, Gina did not approach that level yet.
No.
Perhaps in time she will.
Maybe.
I don't think her career is over with in the entertainment industry. I think she's going to get another shot, and you know, hopefully it's one of those you learn from your mistakes. So the next one that we wanted to talk about was the new Star Wars shows on Disney Plus, not Disney Republic, like I said during the read through.
That was really kind of funny.
So we got a whole bunch of shows from Disney. In fact, we got a whole bunch of documentaries about the new shows, which was also interesting.
Right.
But the first one I wanted to talk about was The Bad Batch. And The Bad Batch was kind of foreshadowed in the final season of Clone Wars. And it was done in such a way that was kind of strange. You know, it played no real purpose, I think, in the Clone Wars series other than to make cameos to set up the new show, which left me very cautious going into it. But this animated follow-up to Star Wars The Clone Wars was set shortly after the events of Episode 3 and follows the team of elite clone troopers as they seek out a new destiny following the end of the war and the rise of the Empire. And what was nice about this was they jump into it in the middle of the action, right at the end of the Clone Wars, so you can kind of put little pinpoints as to where they are, so you know exactly what's happening, where everything is, and you walk into it with a comfortable feeling if you're a Star Wars fan who watched the Clone Wars and watched the movie, the prequel movies and stuff. So that kind of helped right off the bat. And then you wound up getting characters that are extremely well developed, which is really a characteristic of Dave Filoni. You know, Dave Filoni knows how to write a character and knows how to make you emotionally invested in that character. And he's done it time and time again, whether it's animated or live action. And you get a character in there, this young clone, Omega, who I thought was really going to be this quirky little sidekick, like the Jar Jar of the series. And they turn out to be one of the most pivotal people, and it makes it's so believable the way it happens. So they did a fantastic job with it. There's another season coming out. I'm very interested in seeing how the next season comes out with it. The next show is Star Wars Visions, which, again, I was very skeptical about this. So this was the other big project, really, big animated project of 2021. And this series features 10 short episodes, allowing various Japanese anime directors an opportunity to play in the Star Wars sandbox. And I've made no bones about the fact that I am not a fan of anime. Don't like it, don't like the style, to the point that it gives me a headache if I watch it for a period of time. And of the 10 that were in here, probably 4 are keepers.
Okay.
Just because of the style, the story. Like everyone knows who's a Star Wars fan that Star Wars itself was, George Lucas was inspired by Akira Kurosawa's samurai movies. And it came out pretty much everywhere in the Star Wars movies. And there was 1 or 2 episodes of Visions that literally looked like Kurosawa movies. They literally have samurais, you know? I mean, it's done in Japanese villages. Some of these are done so well that at the end of this, 30-minute episode, I was wanting more. Now, that's a 40% hit rate for me. For anime, which is very good.
That's high for you.
I did not expect it to be that high.
Right.
The other 6 are complete throwaways, in my opinion. I'm sure people will argue with me till they're blue in the face. But I just couldn't buy into the stories. I couldn't buy into the animation style. Some of it was just too goofy. It was too cartoonish. It was very un-Star Wars-like. So, for the 10, I think it makes it worthwhile to watch the whole series and form your own opinion.
Sure.
And the last one was one that we just got this week, as a matter of fact, the Book of Boba Fett. So we are getting the first Mandalorian spinoff in the form of Book of Boba Fett, which features Boba and his new right-hand woman, Fennec Shan, as they take control of the late Jabba's criminal empire. Now, again, when we got that closing scene in the last episode of The Mandalorian and we see him take the throne, I almost gagged because it seemed so goofy, so far-fetched. It was cool seeing Boba show up in the
couple of episodes.
The couple of episodes of Mandalorian, and I was content with that. I didn't need to see a Boba Fett series, but seeing that scene where he comes in and he storms in with the spurs and he shoots them and he takes over the throne, it was just a little too old Western for me.
I was going to say too spaghetti Western.
Yeah,
for you.
it was too much, and it didn't hold out much hope. We've only seen 1 episode so far. And the 1 episode itself does a very good job of flashbacks, of showing you how he got to that point.
Right.
Everybody wanted to know how he survived the Sarlacc pit. So you get to learn that. You get to learn a little bit more history about him. You get to find out why his face, his body is so scarred and stuff. So I'm cautiously optimistic at this point. The first episode did not wow me like the first episode of Mandalorian did.
Well, because there's no Baby Yoda.
It wasn't even that. You didn't get Baby Yoda till the end. But the first episode of Mandalorian grabbed you by the throat and just shook you into, like, the new era of Star Wars. This one, you kind of mosey down the street with Boba on, and then somebody kicked you in the face and
because he walks. He doesn't, he walks on his 2 feet. So
yeah. But, he didn't chop anybody's head off with the door or anything like that, like Mando did in the first episode.
Well,
But it has potential. And my concern is that it's going to be like these other Disney series, especially the Marvel ones, where you get a very short season, 6 or 7 episodes, and they take 4 or 5 episodes to ramp up to really become quality. We just sat through Hawkeye, and Hawkeye, it wasn't until episode 5 of Hawkeye that I really started to enjoy it. There was just so much setup that they tried to do ahead of time and kind of overthought things. And
it almost makes you wonder if they had done like a 3-hour movie or 2 1.5-hour part 1, part 2.
Right.
Would it have?
And that's what I think with Boba Fett is. I don't need a series.
Right.
You give me an 1.5-hour, 2-hour-long movie of Boba Fett, and I think you sum up everything I need to know. And then if you want to come up with a series after that for continuing adventures and you think there's something there, great.
Right.
But to drag out this 2-hour-long movie...
And I think that's what's going to happen with the other 2 series.
Well, with Obi-Wan, it's not bad because it's a mini-series. So
right, but that's what
you're only getting a couple of episodes.
Right, that's true. But then the Cassian Andor one,
which doesn't need to happen,
where you could have you're probably going to feel we could have done this in a...
Cassian Andor could have been done. His backstory could have been done as flashbacks in Rogue One.
True. Yeah.
There is nothing compelling about that man that makes me want to see a series on him.
Yeah. Well, we'll see.
Any more than I wanted to see a Han Solo movie or a sequel that they're planning on doing.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
God.
There's talk of a sequel.
Oh, Lord.
So, but anyway.
Wow, you're really gonna run out to see that one.
Yeah. Anyway, that's our flashback for our Tales from the Edge of the Galaxy.
Oh, you still had your High Republic stuff.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah. See, I got so down on Boba there. So yes,
Boba.
our third story to reflect on is the High Republic kicking off. So publishing is one area where the Star Wars franchise is coming into the new year with blasters firing. January 5th marked the official beginning, last January 5th, not the coming January 5th, of the High Republic, a multi-pronged publishing initiative aimed at shedding light on a previously unknown portion of the Star Wars timeline. Set roughly 200 years before Episode 1, the High Republic explores a period when the Jedi are still at the height of their power and the Republic hasn't yet collapsed into tyranny. So what I really was focused on, they came out with a number of comics, young adult novels, and adult novels. And what I was really focused on was the adult novels. So there's really 3 planned in the first series coming out. The first of which is Light of the Jedi, which came out January 5th, which I just finished a little while ago. This was by Charles Soule. And it was a good starter. It was a little slow starting off. You were introducing characters you didn't know. The one concern that I had was when they announced the time period, you knew that it was within Yoda's timeline.
Okay.
And I didn't want them to basically make it a Yoda novel. So Yoda appears in the novel, but kind of in reference form. He never really plays a role in it. So you kind of get your new array of Jedi that you get to see. And it's interesting because you get to learn new things about how the Jedi operate, what their organization's like, how they work with technology. So it was very interesting to learn some of that stuff. The next one in line is Rising Storm, which came out June 29th, which I purchased. I haven't started reading it because I'm reading the Expanse novel at the moment. I kind of got into this late. I didn't get into reading this until the fall. So I'm a little bit behind. So Rising Storm came out the 29th of June by Cavan Scott. Now, I haven't read anything by Charles Soule or Cavan Scott before. They've both done novels in the Star Wars universe as well as other things. And I was very impressed with the first one. The third one comes out January 4th, so it's coming out next week. And that's Fallen Star by Claudia Gray. Now, I've read a number of her books in the past, Lost Stars and Bloodline, and I think she's a fantastic author. So I'm very much looking forward to that one, but I have to get through Rising Storm first. And they've got a lot of stuff planned for this. They've got a potential video game, open world video game that's going to be set in the High Republic. They have a tie-in to the Galactic Star Cruiser that's going to have some High Republic story assigned to it. I was not enthusiastic about it, because it felt very much like Disney gave up on their sequel trilogy because it was terrible, and they wanted to reinvent Star Wars. Like High Republic to me is almost like relaunching of Star Wars. So I was very skeptical about this, and I'm still cautiously optimistic again to see where this goes. But so far, the first novel itself, I think, held its own.
Okay.
So that's all for our flashback on Tales from the Edge of the Galaxy. We're going to take a quick break, come back with our entertainment news real quick, and then sum up. We're actually pushing late right now.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, so we'll be right back.
Insights into Teens, a podcast series exploring the issues and challenges of today's youth. talking to real teens about real teen problems. Explore issues from braces to puberty, social anxiety to financial responsibility. Each week, we talk about the topics concerning today's youth. We look at how the issues affect teens, how to cope with these issues, and how parents, friends, and loved ones can help teens handle these challenges. Check out our video episodes on youtube.com/insightsintothings. Catch our audio versions on podcast.insightsintoteens.com or on the web at insightsintothings.com.
Go for entertainment recap.
So here were our top, I guess, stories that we wanted to just kind of go back over. So the first one was the Jeopardy host debacle. So who knew that the game show Jeopardy would be such a big topic of discussion in 2021? As the long-running series looked to find a new host after the death of Alex Trebek, it hired one in executive producer Mike Richards. But that didn't last long. After a series of sexist, racist, and homophobic, wow, I can't talk today, comments he made on a podcast between 2013 and 2014 were unearthed. He was removed from the job, and since his departure, Big Bang Theory alum Maya Bialik and multiple-time Jeopardy winner Ken Jennings have been sharing the duties of hosting back and forth.
And this wouldn't have been such a big deal if they hadn't made such a big deal about bringing all the celebrities in to try out for it.
Right, and that was the thing, is you had all these different people that came and were filling in, and you had all these people that were like, oh, this would be a great host, and this would be a great host, and why don't you have this one? And then they totally went with an executive producer who nobody really knew. And then, all of a sudden, you have all these things. I'll bet you it was
his decision to do it,
Probably. He was like, oh, I'll do the job.
Yeah.
So right now it goes back and forth between the two, and maybe that's how they'll kind of leave it, because Mayim she was only supposed to do, like, the specialty ones, I think was what she had decided to do, and Jennings was kind of going to do the other. So I think they've been kind of going back and forth since then. So that was kind of one of the interesting stories of the year. The next was Meghan Markle, Prince Harry, their detail of the royal family rift in the tell-all interview. So that was kind of one of the big things, was that Meghan and Harry had sat down with Oprah for a wide-ranging interview back in March, which saw the couple make bombshell accusations about members of the British royal family, including that there were concerns and conversations about how dark their son Archie's skin might be when he was born. Now, since that time, their daughter was born, Lilibet, and they're, you still hear about them in the news, but it was a very telling thing that, that there were, members of the family that were concerned because of Meghan's racial background. Right. And it kind of, you pretty much knew the royals kind of felt a certain way to begin with. And this just kind of
what's funny is the United States tends to get a lot of bad press because of the racial tensions that we have here. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times it's Great Britain that looks down on us. And they have for years. Right. And to find out that, the royal family of Great Britain might harbor some, racist tendencies themselves. Right. Kind of brings them down a notch, And they're a family that is not without controversy to begin with.
Oh, absolutely.
And they're a family that is they're an organization, we'll say, that is struggling to justify their continued existence.
Yeah, and
with
of course,
the British people.
Almost every member of the family has something going on.
They got more skeletons in their closet than the Haunted Mansion does.
It's a good one.
So.
And then finally, our last story was revolving around Britney Spears and her conservatorship battle. So Britney Spears' conservatorship drama was perhaps one of the most talked about controversies in Hollywood in 2021 after numerous documentaries covered the pop star's legal and family drama. A judge lifted her relieved her from her 13-year court-ordered once and for all in in November. So this was something I didn't even realize she even had in place. And I guess not that many people knew, but her father was basically in control of basically her whole entire life, everything. Who she could see, and, you know, even her body autonomy.
Well,
you know,
and I'll
was
be
part
honest
of it
with
too.
you. What really qualified this for this list for me was that at no point in time during Britney Spears' life have I given a damn about her. And reading about this, it actually caught my eye and caught my attention of, one, how could you do this to another human being?
Right.
Not that I felt sympathy for her. I just felt, you know, humanitarian sympathy for you.
Right.
But two, how could your own father do this to you?
Basically, she was a trained monkey.
Yeah.
You know, and she had her leash, and she'd have to go back in the cage and go out and perform when, you know,
and the fact that when they went through these legal proceedings, there was a chance that the judge wasn't going to repeal it. And it's like, this is like slavery, guys. Lincoln freed the slaves.
Right.
You know?
And it's not like she was a minor.
Right.
I could understand, okay, you have it until, you know, she's 21 even.
Right.
Not even go 18.
Right.
Go, okay, 21. Or 25 if you know, it went on so much longer than it needed to really go on. So.
And granted, it probably saved her life on a number of occasions because she was such a train wreck.
Right. And I could see where, you know, maybe there were times throughout where, okay, we're gonna let her go from it, and then they didn't.
But the thing is, there comes a point where there has to be some level of personal accountability.
Absolutely. If you want to shave your head and be a wacko, then go right ahead, do that.
Exactly.
So
that was all we had for our entertainment recap. We'll be right back with our, well, not our insightful pick, I guess. That's what the script says. It's really not that. It's just a recap of our Ocean City Comic Con. We'll be right back. So, okay, we went to Ocean City. We went to Maryland.
Yeah, 3 weeks ago.
We did. And one of the highlights of that was I managed to trip and fall in the rain and crack a rib and suffer through that for the last 3 weeks. Still suffering from it, which was why we didn't do the podcast. I suffer through one podcast for our Insights into Teens. But I do have some footage that we took. Let me run that, and let's just talk about our impressions of the show.
Sure.
go with our afterthoughts that I didn't cue any of them up for.
Sure. So to get your calendar ready for next year, we have ZoloCon, which will be March 5th and March 6th, and that's in Warminster, Pennsylvania. That's at the Fugue, which is one of our favorite venues to go to, just for the sheer enjoyment of that location. So it's normally done like end of February, beginning of March. This was the one that they had postponed until the summer last year, so it's only been a couple of months since they've done it before, and they're doing it again. So good that they're kind of getting back on track.
That was one that I didn't make it to last time because I wasn't feeling well.
You weren't feeling well. So hopefully you'll be feeling better for this one, and you can join us for that. And then come April, there is the Delaware Train Show on Saturday, April 2nd, and then the April Fool's Toy Show, which is Sunday, April 3rd, another venue that we enjoy, which is at the Nurse Shrine Center in Newcastle, Delaware. They had the show in October, but we weren't able to go because of marching band season.
Right.
So this is one, they do a couple throughout the year.
This is one we can get to.
This is one that we will be able to get to.
We're not bound by marching band for this one.
Not yet. We don't know when marching band starts. And then finally, Fan Expo, which was formerly known as Wizard World, the new company, will be at the Philadelphia Convention Center, also in April 8th through the 10th.
Now, this is one that I'm very interested in seeing how they handle it, because it's been a few years since we've been to Wizard World.
Right.
But that's one that we used to go to quite frequently.
Right. So they were doing discount tickets, I think, up until Christmas. I'm sure there's probably some discount tickets. There's always some kind of discount, going on. This was one that was supposed to be at the Greater Philadelphia Expo Center.
But I guess it wasn't great enough.
It wasn't, because we were kind of excited about that, because we were like, great, we don't have to pay for parking and deal with the long walk, and. Yep. Now we're like, it's in Philly again.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
We'll
April is still a couple months away. So.
Yep. So. But I think that was it for today's show. We went kind of long, as one of our longest shows. So I'm not going to bore people with my show plugs at the end here. Just going to say happy New Year to everybody.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll have a better year next year, and COVID won't be nearly as much of an impact.
Here's to 2022.
Amen to that. That's it. We're done. We're out.
Be safe, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.